the world is so abundant, there is no way that my need is going to exhaust God's supply.
I love that. There's no way that my need will exhaust God's supply. That's great. Hello, my name is Gretchen Baskerville, and today I'm interviewing Shirley Fessel for the third time. She is the author of the woman's workbook, Redemption from Biblical Battering. In part 1 and part 2, she shared her own story of being an idealistic, devout young woman who wanted to serve the Lord with all her heart. She fell in love with a man who was in pastoral ministry. He was an inspiring speaker. She was sure they would serve the Lord together all their lives. But it turned out he wasn't safe, and it wasn't safe to stay. Behind closed doors, he was a violent man, a church leader who was vicious to her and the children. They lived in terror. He financially abused Shirley, who supported the family. He confiscated her paychecks for 10 years, refusing to give her money for even the basics, such as clothing. In part 2, she talked about getting away and rebuilding her life and her children's life. She talked about how she now owns her own home and is financially stable. So today is part 3. Shirley has gotten many questions about how she survived financially after her divorce and how she rebuilt. So let's jump right in. Welcome, Shirley.
I'm so grateful to be here, Gretchen. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, because I've got the same questions everyone else does. So before you divorced, you probably had some idea of how you were going to support you and the kids. What financial arrangements had you made prior to leaving?
Well, I was in education, and at that time, at the end of May, at the close of school, they gave us all 3 checks for the summer in one lump sum. And so I had set up a separate account where I put this money in preparation to leave as soon as school was over.
Great. So you knew you were going to get a big lump sum. You opened up a separate bank account and you put it there. And yes. Anything else?
Well, I already had a house that I had bought previously to the marriage in another city. And so that was my plan. However, being a charming, charismatic man, he talked the 18-year-old bank teller out of giving him that money.
Wait a second. Explain that to us. He talked the bank teller into giving him your money?
Yes.
The money that was in the separate bank account?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yes.
And can I say something? I mean, I am shocked, but to be honest with you, you are the third person who has told me a story like this. So yes. It does happen. Okay. So what did you do then?
Well, I had arranged to get back up to my home, and but now I had nothing, no money. And so the children and I, let me just preface this by saying that last time, the third time I went back, he promised to go to counseling. That's the only reason I went back. So he only did that, to have us back. He did not go to counseling. So you really can't believe anything they say.
Yeah. So he made a promise that he would go to counseling, but in reality, once you came back,
right,
he'd gotten what he wanted, and so he didn't follow through with his promise.
All these years, all the Bible study, he was only interested in the money the whole time. So anyway,
and why do you say that? How do you know he was only interested in your money all this time?
Because he used all my money, and anytime I wanted to use money for anything at all, he would say I was being faithless. God gave me the ability to earn this money. I owed it to God to give it back. And of course, the mission that he wanted it to be given back to was the churches we were working on. So it was never okay for me to use money I earned for what I needed or the children needed. It was always okay for him to use it for whatever he wanted.
Mm. Oh,
So
wow.
in that way,
Yeah.
he maintained control, you see.
Got it. Got
And
it.
then after I left in divorce, I did hear of another woman that he had cleaned her bank account out.
Oh, another woman in the church at the same time or before you?
Well, I don't think she was in the church, but my point was, as a minister, he was used to living on other people's money.
Mm.
He always
Oh, wow.
assumed he could raise money from the church for whatever he wanted.
Okay. So he saw the church tithes and offerings as sort of being his own personal piggy
His
bank.
own, his own personal. And there was a pastor in the community who told his congregation every year that he wouldn't stay unless they got him a new Cadillac.
Oh, my. A new Cadillac.
Yeah, so
Okay.
some of these men are in it for that. But anyway,
Got it. So now let's go back for a second. You had owned a home before the marriage,
yes,
which tells me as a young woman, you were really good with money.
yes,
And you were a responsible, reliable person. So here you divorce him. He cleans out either prior to or just after you divorce him. He sweet talks the teller, cleans out your bank account. Now what do you do?
well, as I said, this was in May, end of May, and I had gotten a job at a university that would start at the end of August. But I had to figure out how to get through the summer months with no money. I could not get food stamps because I had a pending job. So I started asking God to guide me to resources. And I really want to talk about how my faith matured during this period.
Yeah, let's talk about that because some of the people have been asking you, what was your view of money before this? And what were your views of God and God's faithfulness?
Exactly. So I did get food from the Sisters of Charity. I got a neighbor who babysat for nothing when I would go to work.
Wow.
The bus,
Bless her.
he had come and taken the car, which I knew he would. And so the neighbor across the street, my job was going to be 20 miles away. So I would take her to work downtown, go to work, come back and pick her up on the way home.
Oh, wow. So she let you use her car.
Right. And I also
Nice.
prepared campus security for him because I figured he would go up there and act a fool, which he did. And they removed him.
So you alerted them in advance.
Yes, but I wanted to talk about the challenge to my faith of this. And what I learned basically is not to make any decisions out of fear.
Mm. Okay, not out of fear. So what does that look like? What is a decision not made out of? Yeah, give us an example.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I really believed everything. So I did not regard money or material goods. I would just give anybody anything they wanted. But when I was in this situation and raising kids, I felt like the money that came in, I was just like a sieve. It just would flow through. I would have no control. I'd try to save, something would come up. I was always under some kind of debt threat. And of course, it did take me 10 years to dig out the debt he left. But what I realized was that my basis for giving had been warped by the teachings that I had, which was to give, empty yourself. Empty yourself. Don't keep anything for yourself. And this is an abusive message or a toxic message from people who want to control you.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's one thing if you believe this, it's another thing if someone is pressuring you by giving you that message, empty yourself, you must give it all, that kind of thing. Absolutely.
Then I started looking at the verses and I started looking at giving out of surplus. The great commandment says to honor myself and then help others, but not to give when I'm in need. Give out of my abundance.
Mm.
So I began applying affirming supply, and I learned that money doesn't really work the way the world says it works. I started examining the inherited beliefs from my parents and realizing that I was over giving to people please. And this is
Mm.
not. God loves a cheerful giver because it means you're free, you're giving freely. So I would stop worrying and ask for guidance to be led on other things I could do for supply other than go, use money I didn't have.
So you mentioned people pleasing. What's the difference between people pleasing and being a normally generous person?
People pleasing enters in under peer pressure, the status, um, wanting to be a good person, valuing how other people see you, not wanting to admit you can't do something, not knowing other ways besides money to help or give. I looked at some verses. I realized that my teaching had separated me from my inner voice of Holy Spirit. That is, that I had a legacy of doubt, chronic self-criticism. One of the things I noticed was some of the good, and this is in the book, some of the people who are really good still feel really bad.
Mm.
They feel really guilty about everything. Whereas the people who are really doing harm really don't feel that way at all. So I looked at my money behavior. I would wonder why I felt that I didn't deserve to be taken care of when I was constantly giving. The scripture said I would be pressed down, shaken together, running over. Instead, I was facing poverty. So I looked at the verse about God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And I started claiming that I would receive the recompense from all those years I had given.
Wow.
I would get those years restored and experience the abundance from all this because even though I was people pleasing, I still would give out of wanting the person to be helped.
Right. So you developed a healthier view of helping. You would still be generous, but it wasn't because you felt guilty or you felt unworthy or that you were being pressured by others.
Right. And so when my husband said I didn't have a right to use the money that God had earned,
We just hold on, Shirley, just for a second. Start that sentence over. We just lost you on the audio. It just warbled.
When my ex said I didn't have the right to use the money that God had given me the ability to earn, I knew that wasn't right. And so I started honoring myself. I started trusting God. I was always concerned, that I didn't know exactly what God's will was. And I just started saying, well, I'm going to do this based on my best guidance. And if I'm making a mistake, I'm going to trust you to work it out.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Lord, I'm going to do the best thing with the best brains, the best that the Holy Spirit's guidance can give me. And if I'm sinning or not serving you well, you'll need to tell me.
Yes.
So good for you. Good for you.
I affirmed God's care and released shame and guilt over having money issues. I claimed it did not mean I was an unworthy person. And I also changed my behavior around the debt that I had. And I started being faithful about it, which means I asked God to make a way. I believe God would make a way, but I asked God to show me what that way was.
And what was God's way in dealing with the debt?
God's way was first, creditors are not God. I stopped feeling harassed and intimidated by creditors. And I became assertive with them. Also, I stopped worrying about bills when I didn't have any money to pay them. I only dealt with my bills when I had some money. And every time I paid a bill, I wrote on the check, "Thank you, God."
Wow.
And then also, I listened for guidance on how to deal with a need in a non-financial way.
Okay. Give us an example of that.
Well, getting the ride was an example of that. Having someone babysit for no money was an example of that. I would do things for them, but I didn't have any money to do anything. And now I hear there's groups of women who barter with each other, which is great, you know.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That's great.
So the other thing that I did was I learned how credit really works. I was always told, by all means, you never want to file bankruptcy. By all means, don't ever file bankruptcy. Well, I found out when you slow pay, your record goes 7 years from the last transaction. So even if you pay a bill, if you pay it slowly, it's almost worse than filing bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
It's going to extend your negative record. So looking back, I would have been better off wiping the slate clean. And I'll tell you a reason I'm saying this. I sold my house because the neighborhood was getting unlivable. And I was going to go buy a house in another area. Now, when I sold my house, I had 3 months at $70 a month left to pay on it before I would own it. But we moved up close to get rid of that 20-mile drive. We moved up close to the university, and the rent at that time was $385 a month, which I had no idea how I would ever pay that amount of money.
$385 a month.
Yeah, on the salary I was getting at the university, which was pittance. I had no idea how I was ever going to pay that. So I put my house with Section 8. So
Section 8. Okay, good.
Guaranteed income. Well, one October, they just decided they weren't going to pay us that much. So I'm laying on the floor crying, wondering how in the world we're going to make it that much. I've listed my house with Section 8, guaranteed rent. Well, I had to move. I moved closer to the university, and that rent was, what is that, like 6 times more, 5 times more
than
I was paying at the house. And I had no way of knowing how I was going to manage that. And then 1 month, Section 8 decided they weren't going to release the rents. So I was on the floor crying, wondering how was I going to get through that month.
And you had rented your own house out through the Section 8 program.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So when that happened, and I went down there and it didn't do any good. When that happened, I decided to sell it.
Okay.
And then the people who bought the house, it took longer for the money to get to me. So once again, I was in dire straits. But then that's when I learned that I was struggling to make payments, minimum payments, slow payments. And it would have been better for me to wipe the slate clean when I got the money for the house. It would have been better to wipe the slate clean and start over again, because all I did was extend the negative report by trying to pay it off little by little.
So you're saying that you wished you had filed for bankruptcy, or are you saying you wished you had used the proceeds from the sale of the house to pay off all your debts once and for all?
Well, what happened was Yeah, I wish I had filed bankruptcy because the proceeds, because it was in a bad neighborhood, was not enough.
Mm.
Really do, I either had to pay the bills, buy another house, or take care of the kids. That was the choice. So we didn't have any furniture or anything. I just came up here with suitcases of clothes. So uh, I went to buy another house. And at that time, they weren't wanting women with children alone to buy houses.
Mm.
So they showed me houses that I wouldn't want to pay on. And that was the only thing that I could afford.
Okay, so houses that are too small or in bad neighborhoods or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Got it.
So I paid off what I could of bills. And I said to myself, I can either save up and try to get a better house with this income, or I can put it into the kids. So I decided to put it into the kids. So
Okay.
they can have sports and activities and summer camps and, you know, enrichment things. And then of course they had to go to work at an early age.
Right.
But then I found one of the best kept secrets that I want to share. And
All right, let us have it.
okay, that's something called co-ops, cooperatives. Cooperatives are
Co-ops.
cooperatives are HUD-based properties which have market rate apartments, but they also have some low income apartments. So if you qualify for the low income apartments and then get more money to have market rate apartments, you can move up, but it's all the same. But the only thing about co-ops is the maintenance is fantastic because the co-op is run by a board of residents.
Wow, nice.
And you have to buy in. You know, it took me, I paid $4,000 to buy in, but it's not your normal low income property. It's
Okay.
very, and everyone, you know, I'd say 90% of the residents are not low income.
Oh, that's interesting. What does a person Google, or how do you do an online search to find out more about that?
Okay, you go to HUD and look for cooperatives.
Okay, go to HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development, and then look under cooperatives. Okay.
That being said, if you can get to know somebody that already lives there, then they will give you a recommendation to get in.
Ah, nice. Okay, good.
Yeah. So you have to really kind of know somebody to get in those because they're careful about who they accept.
Right.
The market rate they charge is less than you would have to pay elsewhere.
Right. That's great. That's great.
Okay, I'm paying $385 at this townhouse, right? The market rate I paid at the HUD cooperative was $425.
Okay.
It's not that big a difference.
And yet you got to own it then at the end.
Yes, I got wonderful closets, 3 bedrooms, you know, and what that would have cost me down the street was $600, $700 at that time.
Wow, sounds like a steal. That's a great idea.
It's the best kept secret, I'm telling you.
So you first of all, you prioritized your kids at the time that you had like no money to spare. You prioritized the kids, and then as you started getting just a little bit of breathing room, then you bought into the cooperative.
Right. And then the last thing I want to share is I changed the way I talk to the kids about money.
Okay.
Because I didn't want them having a poverty consciousness. I didn't want to keep saying to them, Mommy can't afford that now, or that's too much money, or, you know. And so we used to go to the parks a lot, to the free swimming pools. We did a lot of free things. And at that time, there was a Santa Mall for kids. And so they would go there and they would pick out their presents, and they might be a quarter or 50 cents. And but when they would say something about getting something, I would say, I've already made my decisions about my money this month.
Ah, okay. So giving them the idea that you plan, that it's strategic, you're not this helpless victim of finances. You've put together your budget and you know what you're going to spend. Great.
Yes, yes. And I didn't say, Mommy can't afford it. It costs too much. This meant this. I did not want to share the mentality that money was more important than they were, or that we would just help us, like you're saying, out there.
That's great.
And I thought we needed new traditions. And so we couldn't really afford the Christmas trees.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that there was the Charlie Brown Christmas tree in the cartoon. At that time, they weren't making the Charlie Brown tree. But I noticed that in the back of the lot were trees that they didn't want to sell. They were really pathetic.
Okay. Pathetic Christmas trees in the back of the lot.
Yes. The outcast.
The outcast Christmas trees.
And so I took the kids back there and I said, oh, look at these trees. Nobody wants these trees. I bet they don't feel good. I said, don't you think they deserve to have a Christmas?
Oh, that's very sweet.
So that was our orphan tree.
The orphan tree. I love it.
Every year we would get an orphan tree that nobody wanted. Well, what the kids didn't know was it's free.
That's great. That's great. What a good workaround.
But I'm just saying, these kinds of inspirations come from affirming time in the presence of God in peace and faith, and waiting for the ideas, waiting for the guidance, but not making any decision out of fear. Because every time I made a decision out of fear where I felt like I was boxed in, I didn't have any alternatives, I would have to, whatever, it never turned out good.
That's good. That's good for people to know and to remember in the back of their mind, waiting for the Lord to reveal something new or different or innovative or creative.
Yeah, to use affirmations, but like I said, so I would affirm something and then I would ask for a sign, or I would wait to get the guidance that went with it.
Could you share with us some of your favorite affirmations, or one that was particularly important to you during this time?
I live in an abundant world and God takes care of our needs.
I love it. I live in an abundant world and God takes care of our needs. Nice. That's great.
In this Psalms especially, there are lots of verses that can become affirmations. If you don't feel comfortable writing your own. But I find that it's important for me to tap into the spiritual power by identifying what my core concern is. And like in the marriage, I used a denial. I said, this evil will not overcome me. It's not God's will for us to live in this chaos.
Yeah.
Because previously, and I explained this in the book, previously, of course, my prayer had been crying and pleading and twisting around and show me what to do and why is he having all this agony stuff. And so when a negative would appear, I would deny his power, and then I would turn it around to a positive. And that was how I exercised my faith in a very specific way, rather than just saying, I know God has a way, or I know God has a way out. It was very specific. Like before I would talk to a creditor, for example, I knew what I was going to say. There is no point in us continuing to talk. I will send you the money when I have it.
Good. Okay. Yeah,
You
because there's no sense in being
know,
verbally abused or beaten up or pressured when you just don't have the money.
You're not entitled to that. It's just money.
Yeah.
And I and my children's lives are worth a lot more.
Right.
And if they were just really stupid, I would say something like, look, I've already been through more than you could ever do to me, so let's just not talk anymore.
That's a great line. That's a great line.
Finding out how the credit system worked, finding out what my priorities were, changing my mindset in dealing with creditors, and bartering.
Okay, great tips. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I just want to say, remember who you are.
And you are a child of the King.
The divine
You are a
spirit,
precious daughter.
the divine spirit lives within you. You are co-creator with God, having children. And the world is so abundant. There is no way that my need is going to exhaust God's supply.
I love that. There's no way that my need will exhaust God's supply. That's great. Now, how can people contact you, and where can they find your book, the wonderful workbook for women, Redemption from Biblical Battering?
It's on Amazon and Kindle. I would love it if they could sign up at my website, shirleyfessel.com.
Okay, great. Would you spell that for us?
Shirley, F as in Frank, ESSEL.
.com.
I just want to not forget to share the most wonderful result of this faith journey is that this year I was able to offer a grant of up to $1,000 for any woman leading a religious abusive relationship.
Wow.
For needs that she may have. It's not for legal fees because there's supposed to be free legal help, but I'm just not interested in donating to the attorney. So
Sure. I understand that.
Needs like for housing, education, transportation, anything that she needs to go forward, because the first year out of abuse is the hardest financially, I really believe. And God has blessed me to the point where I had surplus that I could pay back and help women go forward. So I did have a deadline on there, but it's extended now. The award will be made in October, Domestic Abuse Awareness Month.
Oh, great. Wonderful. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? That's perfect timing.
Yeah, if you go to the website and fill out the contact form, I will send you the application. Indicate on there that you would like an application for the RBB Thriver Grant.
The RBB Thriver Grant. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just once again, for everyone, they can contact you through the contact form on your website, which is shirleyfessel.com, SHIRLEY, F like Frank, ESS like Sam, EL.com, shirleyfessel.com. They can use the contact form to inquire about the RBB Thriver Grant, and they can go to Amazon to find your book, which is called Redemption from Biblical Battering. Well, thank you so much, Shirley. I really appreciate your inspiration and how you turned around the spiritually abusive messages in your home to the spiritually uplifting messages that God has abundance. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gretchen, and I love your work you're doing.
Thank you.